Hi, my name is Laura Suggs. I'm a professor of biomedical engineering at the University of Texas at Austin. And on behalf of myself and my co-investigator, Dr. Mia Markey, I'd like to tell you today about our experience running a research experience for undergrads, which is a summer program funded by the National Science Foundation. This is our experience and doesn't reflect the opinions of NSF. But what we hope to do here is we hope to give other program directors or potentially people thinking about running such a program some recommendations. And in particular, we have recommendations for student selection and the use of an NFL draft style approach. So one of the things that we recognized early on is that there may be a perception of conflicting goals between the funding agency, in our case, the NSF, and the department at which an REU program might be housed. So typically the agency goals are to provide research opportunities for students who might not otherwise get them. Either they're at a university or a program that doesn't have those opportunities, or they may not have access to those opportunities. Typically departments are looking at REUs to try and preview future grad students or recruit competitive students towards their program. And what we recognize is that these seemingly conflicting goals can actually be synergistic. And what I hope to illustrate now is how one might go about synergizing those goals or balancing those goals. Our approach was to target rising sophomores. So these are students who had just completed their first year of undergrad education. The challenge for us was that these students may not have had mentoring experiences yet so early in college. So they may not have had really any experience in terms of research. The benefit for us was that we were able to train those students fresh. And the benefit for the scholars themselves was that they were able to go back to their home institution with prior research experience and potentially have an opportunity to build on that and to build their experiences to make more competitive grad school applications. That had important implications for our application process. So one of the things that was that we noticed early on is that these students are quite young in their educational process. So it's difficult to look at a rising sophomore and really assess whether or not they're going to fit in your program and really fit in a research environment. So for us, what we could have viewed as a negative, we chose to view as a benefit for our program, in that instead of relying on typical metrics that might be prior research success, we were able to seek out characteristics and skills that these students might have that would allow them to persist in scientific research throughout their lifetime. So things that we wanted to assess, these skills and characteristics that we were looking for, are comfort with and skills for effective non-classroom learning. So what were they able to learn outside of the classroom? We were also interested in looking for students that were able to persevere, that were able to stick with things that were hard and learn from failure. Research often is a series of failures and a huge learning opportunity. And we were also looking for scholars who had an abiding enthusiasm for science, again, not just in a classroom type setting. So in terms of our recruitment, we altered our prompts for these students. So they had to answer 3 essay questions. The first question was, tell us about how you learned something outside of a formal classroom environment. What impact did this experience have on you? So here we were looking for comfort and skill development outside of a formal classroom setting. The second prompt was, tell us about a challenge that you were faced with and how you were able to overcome this adversity. So what was your strategy to persevere and what did you learn? Here we're looking for students that have some track record and have some strategies for persevering through failure and learning from failure. And then the third and final essay prompt was, tell us about a scientific topic or topics that you have been exposed to in your coursework that excite you. Why are they of particular interest to you? So here we were trying to assess and determine the extent to which students were enthusiastic about science and had an abiding interest for scientific investigation. Other things that we noticed for these quite young students are that they didn't always have a good population of faculty that were going to be able to serve as letter writers. So in freshman courses, often these are large courses and the students may not know any faculty. So what we do then is provide them with direct guidance on selecting more relevant letter writers. So we guide them away from going back to high school teachers and try to encourage them to get to know their existing faculty, college STEM professors, so that they would be better able to write letters for them. This then had implications for the review process itself. And what we came up with is what we think of as an NFL draft style approach. And so the approach is that we have two reviewers, myself and Dr. Markey, and each of us were focused on the two opposing goals that we had with the program. So one of us would focus on the departmental goals, these highly competitive students. One would focus on students that might not otherwise have research experiences. So we weren't necessarily able to assess that research success, but we were looking at that potential. So both goals in this draft style approach are considered, and neither dominates the review process. The other thing that was important in this process is that we weren't just selecting a cohort of individuals, we were selecting a cohort that would later become a team. And this REU team, it was important for us to find students from different schools and regions. It was important for these students to potentially fit within a wide range of research projects. So we have over 20 faculty participating in our REU summer program. So we couldn't have students in just one or two research labs. We were also interested in finding students that had a diversity of life experiences. What we noticed from our 4 years leading this program is that students learn so much from one another, as well as from their mentors, but we wanted to have a diverse cohort so that the students would maximize their own learning experience. So the draft pick process proceeds by reviewers, each of our two reviewers taking turns in a number of rounds. So typically we went through 5 or 6 rounds, picking our primary cohort that we were going to make offers to, as well as some alternates. We would build the team sequentially, so taking turns pick by pick. And this allowed us to sort of reevaluate the cohort as it developed. So combining both individual characteristics of the students as well as balancing our cohort criteria. So the process went something like this. Reviewer A would go through their first round pick. Reviewer B would then pick their first round pick, and they might have the opportunity to adjust their criteria as the rounds progress. So for example, if reviewer A picked a student from University X and reviewer B was deciding between two equally qualified students, one from University X and one from Y, they might choose then that student from University Y based on the first reviewer's pick. And then we would proceed for these 5 or 6 rounds accordingly. So this also has some implications for the site activities. It was a challenge to us to receive students so soon in our educational process. So as we welcome sophomore scholars to campus, what we realized is that prior to their arrival, we needed to do a lot more in terms of training their grad student mentors. So the challenge was that these scholars needed more mentorship and they had greater program needs than more junior scholars. So this benefited the young scholars in that they had more of a comprehensive support structure, more of a consistent level of mentoring at our program. And so our tip for this is to not reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of great programs out there. We employed the Entering Mentoring curriculum that's been published out of the University of Wisconsin with support from HHMI. The Entering Mentoring curriculum provides numerous curricula and resources, and we were able to implement this prior to the students' arrival on campus. The other thing that we were noticing is that the students also needed to be introduced to skills and common research practices prior to their involvement in individual labs. So the challenge then was that these scholars typically didn't have experience in a lab, and we needed to quickly and effectively introduce them to common methodologies. Again, our recommendation is to leverage on-campus resources. So for example, in our program, one of the skills we introduced is statistical analysis, and we were able to leverage our statistics department in order to give some of those experiences. There may be other places where outreach activities have been developed or other student organizations can be leveraged to try to give boot camp experiences, typically in the first week upon arrival. And then it is also important, even before the students arrive, to make a plan for assessment. So the challenge, again, for these relatively inexperienced scholars is that most programs are evaluating outcomes based on what one might see with a more experienced scholar. So for example, publications or presentations or other metrics. For us, what we saw is, again, the benefit was allowing us to look at identity. So identity as a scholar, identity as a scientist, and skill development for lifelong learning in our incoming scholars. So again, our tip is to leverage what is available on campus in educational psychology or STEM education. Particularly, one of the things that was successful in our program is to look at STEM education trainees, so graduate students in education who were able to develop assessment tools. So there are quite a few assessment tools, so surveys and things that are available to employ to kind of try to get at and measure some of these identity and skill development metrics. So in conclusion, I would like to emphasize that what might seem like conflicting goals in our case actually ended up, upon resolution, being synergistic, and we believe we're able to benefit our program. So these conflicting goals actually ended up creating a cohort that we are so proud of over these 4 years, that worked together well, that were synergistic, and who learned from one another and made our program better. So overall, we recommend some of these tools might be employed in your own program at your home institution. And we'll be happy to meet and talk with anybody who's interested in developing such a program. And so with that, I thank you, my collaborator, Dr. Markey, thanks you as well. And in particular, I'd like to thank our program coordinator, Margot Cousins, and as well thank the NSF for their generous funding. Thanks.